I mean, in 2018, a team of software engineers at Facebook literally changed a single line of code. And in doing so, they fundamentally fractured global political discourse.
Right, just one quiet adjustment.
With one adjustment. They took the little angry emoji reaction, the red face that users click when they are absolutely furious, and they assigned it an algorithmic weight 5 times heavier than a standard like.
Which is just staggering when you think about it.
Exactly. 5 times the distribution power simply for making someone despise their neighbor. And they had the audacity to package this to the public as a feature designed to, boost meaningful social interactions.
I mean, it is arguably one of the most consequential and honestly destructive quiet adjustments in the history of digital architecture. They essentially built a direct outrage subsidy into the bedrock of the public square.
And that right there is exactly why we do this deep dive. Because if you want the polite, sanitized, PR-approved version of why the internet is broken, you can just go listen to the podcast series down the hall.
Oh, absolutely.
You know the ones I'm talking about. Everyone's sitting around in suits, aggressively nodding while reciting talking points drafted by corporate consultants. They sit there pretending they aren't just reading off a teleprompter, posturing as the ultimate experts.
It's highly performative.
It's exhausting is what it is. But let's be incredibly real for a second. Our success here paved the way for those sanitized spin-offs. We do not play the polite game. Fuck them.
Well said.
I mean, if you were with us back in the chaotic, brilliant days of the DLB 11.6 music focal point streams, you know our dynamic. The trolls and the comments still obsess over that era. They still call us DLB. And honestly, I love it because that unfiltered, live-wire authenticity is what built this community. We don't read scripts. We tear apart the matrix.
The contrast in methodology really is important here. I mean, they summarize the polite discourse. We examine the structural mechanics of the discourse itself. And today, the stakes for that kind of structural examination are they're incredibly high.
So what exactly are we unpacking today?
We are pulling apart the architecture of modern performative activism. We are looking at selective outrage, not as a moral failing of individuals, but as a manufactured, engineered product.
Okay, let's unpack this, because I know you, the listener sitting there right now, you are exhausted. You hate logging onto your feed and feeling like you're trapped in this endless, looping theater production where everyone is just screaming at each other, but nothing ever actually changes.
Right, it's a feeling of complete digital burnout.
Yeah, and today, we are validating that exhaustion. We are going to dismantle the entire system, tracing the hypocrisy all the way from 19th century abolitionists directly to the algorithmic virtue signaling of 2025.
It's a direct lineage.
It really is. So let's go back to that Facebook code change, because the platforms have lied to us for years. Executives sat in front of Congress, played the victim, and claimed, oh, we just show people what they want to see. It's a neutral mirror.
Which is a profound misrepresentation. And the thing is, we no longer have to guess about it. The landmark 2025 pre-registered algorithmic audit of Twitter completely dismantled that defense.
Wait, pause for a second. For the audience, what exactly makes a pre-registered audit so crucial here?
Well, a pre-registered audit means the researchers publicly locked in their methodology before they ever ran the data. So they couldn't, move the goalposts later to find the conclusion they wanted.
So no statistical manipulation after the fact.
Exactly. They systematically compared engagement-based ranking systems, which are the default algorithmic feeds we all use, against a simple reverse chronological baseline.
So just a raw feed of exactly what the people you follow posted in the exact order they posted it. No algorithm deciding what's important.
Correct. Just a pure timeline. And the findings were stark. The engagement-based algorithms systematically and aggressively prioritize emotionally charged, partisan, and out-group hostile content.
So it's actively hunting for fights.
It is. It doesn't just reflect your organic choices. It surfaces polarizing content at levels far exceeding what your own individual follow list would ever organically generate. It actively searches the network for the content most likely to trigger a moralized emotional response and then injects it directly into your feed.
But hold on, I want to play devil's advocate here. If the algorithm is surfacing it, it's because people are clicking on it, right? So aren't the tech executives technically correct? We are technically asking for it.
You are touching on a massive tension in behavioral economics here. It's the divergence between revealed preferences and stated preferences. And they are absolutely not the same thing.
Okay, break that down. What's the difference?
Revealed preferences are your reflexive actions. The immediate clicks, the angry retweets, the doom scrolling at midnight. That is what the engagement algorithm measures and maximizes. It treats a reflexive click as a conscious endorsement.
Oh, I see. So it's like me saying I want to eat a kale salad to get healthy. That's my stated preference. But at 2 a.m., my revealed preference is pulling a family-sized bag of spicy Doritos out of the pantry.
That analogy holds perfectly, because when researchers actually survey users, asking them to genuinely reflect on their digital diets, users systematically declare a stated preference for healthier, more constructive discourse.
They literally say they want the kale salad.
Yes, exactly. They express deep dissatisfaction with the polarizing political content selected for them. The engagement-optimized feeds actually make users feel worse about themselves and worse about political outgroups.
That is so depressing.
It is the tragedy of modern platforms. They are trapping us in polarized filter bubbles that satisfy our reflexive lizard brain impulses but deeply betray our higher reflective values.
We're literally building a society optimized for the 2 a.m. Doritos binge and then wondering why everybody is chronically sick. But it gets deeper than just clicking on bad content, right? Because we aren't just passive consumers. We are actively performing for this system. I was looking at the source stack before we started, and researchers actually created a mathematical formula for the spread of human fury online.
Yes, they mapped the modeling of moral outrage online. It is fascinating stuff. They modeled the probability of an individual expressing moral outrage at any given time, which they represented as the formula P of O sub I comma T.
Sounds like something out of a physics textbook.
It really does. But what they found is that this probability is driven by two distinct mechanisms: reinforcement learning and norm learning.
Okay, let me guess. Reinforcement learning is the dopamine hit, the likes, the retweets, the immediate validation.
Precisely. In the formula, that is represented by the coefficient alpha. Receiving likes for posting an outraged comment increases the statistical likelihood you will express outrage again. You basically learn that fury pays out in social currency.
It's training us like lab rats.
It is. But the other side of the equation is norm learning, represented by the coefficient beta. Norm learning dictates that you automatically adjust your behavior to match the observed social norms of your immediate digital peers. And the empirical analysis shows something truly terrifying.
Wait, I feel a plot twist coming.
And highly homophilic network.
Stop right there. Define homophilic for the listener, just so we are all on the same page.
Think of it as birds of a feather flocking together. A homophilic network is essentially a rigid echo chamber. It is a highly dense, ideologically uniform digital tribe where everyone shares the exact same baseline beliefs.
Okay, got it. So what happens in those echo chambers?
What the math shows is that in these extreme echo chambers, the norm learning coefficient beta scales exponentially. It completely overshadows alpha.
Wait, let me map this out. If beta overshadows alpha, that means the individual reward, like the likes and retweets, it just no longer matters.
That is exactly what it means. In an extreme digital tribe, individuals conform to the dominant outrage expression patterns of their group, regardless of the specific level of individual social feedback they receive.
I really want to make sure I am grasping the sheer scale of this. You're saying it operates like a massive flock of birds. At a certain density, a single bird isn't flying toward a specific food source anymore. It isn't seeking an individual reward. It is literally just flying in a frantic pattern to avoid crashing into the rest of the flock.
That is a brilliant way to visualize it. You don't post outrage because it gets you likes anymore. You post outrage because the ambient temperature of your digital environment demands it. You do it just to blend in with the fury of the crowd.
That is genuinely terrifying. It means we aren't even hunting for the dopamine hit of a viral tweet at a certain point. We are just mimicking the ambient rage of our group chat so we don't get kicked out of the tribe.
We become characters playing a role for the algorithm.
Entirely. We are playing characters for the algorithm and for each other. But if we pull back the lens a bit, using systemic injustice to boost your own social standing, that is not some Gen Z internet invention.
No, not at all.
That is a deeply ingrained American tradition.
The historical parallels are incredibly clarifying here. The instinct to use symbolic purity to enhance one's social standing while entirely avoiding any actual structural sacrifice has very deep roots. We can look directly at the 19th century abolitionist movement for a perfect example.
Oh, Frederick Douglass. Let's talk about his 1852 speech, "What to the slave is the 4th of July?" Because he was staring right at this exact kind of performative hypocrisy. Set the scene for us.
So Douglass, who was a former enslaved person and undoubtedly one of the most brilliant orators in American history, delivered that speech at Corinthian Hall in Rochester, New York.
Right.
He was speaking to a crowd of about 600 people. And crucially, this was a largely white anti-slavery audience. The Rochester Ladies Anti-Slavery Society actually invited him.
So he's speaking to the allies, essentially.
Exactly. And he used the opportunity to absolutely eviscerate the hypocrisy of the American establishment. He condemned the nation for celebrating independence while perpetuating enslavement. But what is deeply relevant to our structural discussion today is his absolute disgust with the elites within the abolitionist sphere itself.
He called out the Christian slaveholders, right? The people using religion as a moral shield.
Yes. He was horrified by Christian advocates who used biblical morality to publicly decry slavery in the abstract or to preach piety while simultaneously upholding and deeply benefiting from racial hierarchies.
The ultimate virtue signal.
And beyond the South, you had Northern abolitionists who were deeply complicit. A Northern textile mill owner might preach anti-slavery from the pulpit on Sunday. He might signal his absolute moral purity to his peers in Boston or New York.
But his money told a different story.
His wealth, the very capital that gave him his elevated social standing, was fundamentally tied to the Southern cotton economy.
They were running their supposedly enlightened northern mills on slave-picked cotton. So let me get this straight. The northern abolitionists buying slave-picked cotton while giving speeches about freedom. They were basically the 1850s version of tech billionaires flying private jets to climate summits in Baku to lecture the rest of us about our carbon footprints.
It is the exact same structural dynamic.
That is wild.
It is moral signaling, completely divorced from material sacrifice. And we see this behavioral pattern continually evolve through the 20th century. Just look at the 1960s civil rights movement.
What happened there?
As the movement progressed, particularly around 1966 with the rise of Black Power rhetoric, organizations like the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, or SNCC, began to sharply call out their white liberal allies.
Wait, why? Weren't those the exact people coming down to march with them in solidarity?
That was precisely the point of contention. White liberals would travel from the north down to the south to march. They inserted themselves into the highly visible, dramatic, televised moments of the movement.
Oh, I see where this is going.
It provided them with immense social capital and a beautiful personal redemption narrative to take back home. But SNCC activists pointed out the glaring hypocrisy. These same individuals were completely ignoring and often actively perpetuating strict racial segregation in their own northern suburbs.
Oh, wow. They wanted the photo op of the march in Selma, but the second someone suggested integrating their local school district in Boston or Chicago, they suddenly had deep concerns about property value.
Exactly, because marching in the South was a low-cost, high-reward signal for their social circle. But integrating their own neighborhood required actual structural economic sacrifice.
It is wild how absolutely nothing changes. The only real difference is that historically you had to be a wealthy northern textile baron or a well-connected suburbanite to play this game. Today, thanks to the smartphone, absolutely everyone has access to the exact same cheap moral posturing.
We have democratized the hypocrisy.
The democratization of hypocrisy. That's a brutal phrase, but it's accurate. But we have to ask why everyday people engage in this. It isn't just pure arrogance, right? I mean, the research suggests it is driven by something much darker. Deep biological terror.
Yes. Digital ostracism.
So if individual humans are mathematically terrified of being ostracized, how exactly does the internet exploit that fear?
To understand that, we have to look at the minimal group paradigm. This is a foundational concept in psychology developed by Henri Tajfel. He demonstrated that human beings do not require a deep history or a shared struggle or even face-to-face contact to form intense tribal allegiances.
What do they need then?
Almost nothing. Tajfel would bring subjects into a lab, have them estimate the number of dots on a screen, and arbitrarily label them either overestimators or underestimators.
Just completely made up labels.
Completely arbitrary. And yet, that meaningless categorization was entirely sufficient to trigger immediate in-group favoritism and out-group discrimination.
Just from dot estimation, our brains are literally just that desperate to find a team to belong to.
Yes. And once we are on a team, neurological research shows that our basic human processing fundamentally alters.
Alters how?
We experience empathy reduction. Neuroimaging reveals a stark reduction in automatic neurological empathy. The anterior cingulate cortex literally stops lighting up when we witness the pain of someone perceived as an outsider.
That is chilling.
Furthermore, we apply systemic double standards. In-group members are routinely excused for moral transgressions. We give them the benefit of the doubt. But out-group members are subjected to intense scrutiny. If they make a mistake, it is immediately framed as evidence of their essential malicious character.
Oh, I see this every day. It's the classic, well, when my guy does it, it's a minor situational error. But when your guy does it, it proves he is a demonic entity bent on destroying society. We see this literally every single day on Twitter.
Constantly.
But how do these digital tribes actually enforce this? I mean, if I'm just sitting in my living room on my phone, why am I so profoundly scared of a digital tribe turning on me?
Because of the visceral terror of social exclusion. There is a fascinating area of research utilizing the cyberball ostracism experiments.
Cyberball, what is that?
Cyberball is a virtual ball-tossing game used by psychologists since the 1990s. The subject plays a digital game of catch with what they believe are two other real people. Eventually, the other two avatars stop throwing the ball to the subject. They systematically ignore and exclude them.
But it's just a digital game of catch. There are no stakes whatsoever.
Zero stakes. It is completely anonymous, yet the results are profound. Being excluded from this meaningless digital game severely violates four fundamental human needs: belongingness, control, self-esteem, and meaningful existence.
All from a fake game of catch.
Yes. The brain registers the social rejection exactly like it registers physical pain.
Mhm.
And what the modern studies show is that baseline levels of FOMO, the fear of missing out, directly predict how severely an individual feels that exclusion.
So if you have high FOMO.
People with high FOMO are exceptionally compliant with tribal demands because the threat of digital exile is simply too painful to bear.
Okay, let's bring this out of the lab and onto the internet. How does this actually dictate what we post on a daily basis?
Well, a massive longitudinal study tracked over 51,000 Twitter diets. A diet is simply a pair of interacting users. They tracked these pairs over 6 months to see how the network regulated behavior.
And what did they find?
They found that users actively and systematically punished group members who refused to conform to the dominant behaviors of the tribe.
Punish them how? Like mean replies.
By withdrawing interaction, isolating them, and eventually severing the connection entirely. But here is the critical finding. The social cost, the ostracism, was significantly higher for individuals who refused to share partisan fake news compared to those who just didn't share neutral content.
Wait, pause. Let me make sure I'm getting this straight. If I'm in a political tribe and I see a headline that makes our opponents look absolutely evil, but I realize the headline is totally fabricated, so I refuse to share it, my tribe will punish me worse than if I just stayed quiet about normal news.
Yes, the digital tribes actively punished intellectual honesty. They rewarded the dissemination of shared delusions. If you refused to share the fake news that functioned as the tribal glue, you were digitally exiled.
That is sickening. It genuinely is. And it brings us directly to this modern concept of slacktivism and vice signaling. And I really want to challenge you, the listener, right now.
It's an important challenge.
Think about the last time you shared a highly partisan infographic on your Instagram story, or publicly confessed your so-called privilege in a group setting, or threw a politically charged hashtag in your bio. I want you to be totally honest with yourself. Are you actually advocating for a cause, or are you just paying digital mafia protection money so the mob doesn't turn on you?
Vice signaling is a particularly fascinating variation of this survival strategy.
How does it differ from regular virtue signaling?
Instead of boasting about your virtues, you publicly confess your moral shortcomings or your complicity in systemic issues. You loudly proclaim your privilege to preempt external criticism and secure your standing within the discourse community. It is a performative vulnerability that paradoxically elevates your moral credentials. It operates as a preemptive shield.
Please don't cancel me. I already told you I am inherently flawed. I mean, it's basically a hostage video masquerading as self-awareness. People don't join these online outrage mobs because they are brave, principled revolutionaries. They join because they are terrified.
Absolutely.
The algorithm leverages our evolutionary need for tribal belonging and literally forces us to perform these rituals just to survive socially.
And this fear creates a perfectly compliant population, which, historically speaking, is exactly what institutional managers rely on.
Boom. So if individual humans are mathematically terrified of being ostracized, what happens when multi-million-dollar institutions figure out how to weaponize that exact same fear?
You get the nonprofit industrial complex, or the MPIC. When grassroots movements are driven by terrified, compliant individuals seeking social validation rather than structural disruption, they become incredibly vulnerable to elite co-optation.
Let's trace the architecture of this. Where did the MPIC even come from? Because it wasn't always like this, right?
No, it wasn't. The historical origin of the NPIC dates back to the post-World War II American city. We had persistent racial segregation, redlining, and rapidly expanding militant demands for civil rights.
The urban crisis.
Exactly. In response to this urban crisis, the federal government rolled out massive discretionary grant programs in the 1960s. Things like urban renewal, the War on Poverty, the Model Cities program. They transferred federal resources directly to local nonprofit organizations.
Which honestly sounds great on paper, decentralizing the money, getting it out of Washington, giving it directly to the community.
On paper, yes, it sounds deeply progressive, but in practice, it bound radical, community-led initiatives directly to the state through administrative surveillance, evaluation metrics, and strict funding conditions.
So it was a trap.
Essentially, take William Shabazz, for instance. He was a neighborhood organizer who launched a radical surplus food program in Boston's South End. It was a true grassroots survival initiative. But to secure the federal grants necessary to expand the program, his initiative was forced to adopt bureaucratic frameworks explicitly designed to constrain any real systemic challenges. They were institutionalized.
And then you add the IRS into the mix, and it becomes a permanent leash on the movement.
Yes, the 1938 tax code additions are pivotal here. Under IRS regulations, any organization formed to disseminate controversial or partisan propaganda is entirely ineligible for 501c3 tax-exempt status.
Oh, there it is.
And this restriction has historically been selectively enforced. It forces radical grassroots organizations to continually water down their political missions. They have to comply with state guidelines just to keep the lights on, ensuring they remain moderate, legible to the bureaucracy, and fundamentally unthreatening to the broader capitalist structure.
We will give you tax-exempt status, but only if you promise not to actually threaten the system that created the poverty in the first place. That is so cynical. And the absolute worst part is how the elites fund this through philanthropic wealth hoarding. The data on foundations is staggering. Break down the 5% rule for us.
Philanthropic foundations are frequently utilized as legal tax shelters for the wealthy elite. Legally, these private foundations are only required to distribute 5% of their net investment assets annually for charitable purposes.
Let me do the math on that for the audience because it is infuriating. If a tech billionaire sets up a $1 billion foundation, they get a massive tax write-off. But they only legally have to spend $50 million of that on actual charity. What happens to the other $950 million?
They invest it. They park the remaining 95% of their endowments in the stock market, real estate, or private equity. They grow their wealth completely tax-free, establishing private elite control over massive resources that would otherwise have been taxed and utilized to fund public social services democratically.
It's a socially sanctioned scam. They get the PR halo of being a grand philanthropist while hoarding billions of dollars tax-free. But how do these foundations actually tame the activists on the ground? Like if I'm an angry organizer in the streets, how does a foundation turn me into a compliant desk worker?
We can understand this perfectly through Coy and Hedin's four-stage model of co-optation. It is a clinical teardown of how movements are essentially McDonaldized.
McDonaldized, I love that.
Stage one is the inception of the movement, the raw, grassroots anger and protest. But stage two is where the co-optation really begins. It's the appropriation of language.
What does that look like in practice?
Elite institutions adopt the rhetoric and the aesthetic of the dissenters without adopting their philosophical commitments.
So it's the whole we hear you, we see you, we value your lived experience, we stand in solidarity.
Exactly. Pure lip service. Then comes stage three, assimilating leadership through professionalization. They recruit moderate leaders or highly visible celebrity activists to staff new, elite-sponsored reform programs. They use a tactic called channeling.
Channeling.
Channeling deliberately diverts the grassroots demands from justice and systemic disruption toward efficiency and bureaucratic management. They centralize decision-making bodies, completely drowning radical, on-the-ground voices in a sea of powerful centrist interests and endless board meetings.
They professionalize the grievance. The modern professional activist isn't Che Guevara. They are essentially an HR department.
That's a very accurate comparison.
They aren't there to protect the revolution. They are there to protect the foundation from liability. They take actual dangerous activists and bury them under grant applications, quarterly deliverables, and performance reviews. They literally take people who want to change the world and turn them into middle managers.
And this is enforced through what sociologists call salience control. The professional managers dictate which issues are important enough to receive funding. They appease the broader public with minor symbolic concessions, which causes a wane in priority for the challenging group. The movement loses its militancy, its autonomy, and its bite.
So, if the nonprofits have successfully corporatized the grassroots, what happens when actual for-profit megacorporations realize that this watered-down, defanged social justice is a highly profitable branding exercise?
You enter the era of woke capitalism.
Ugh. I hate that term because it's been so deeply weaponized in the culture wars, but structurally, it is incredibly accurate. Let's trace the etymology of the word woke first, because its journey from the underground to the corporate boardroom is just wild.
The term has profound roots in Black American survival. It actually appears in 1938 with Lead Belly, the folk musician, singing about the Scottsboro Boys, 9 Black teenagers falsely accused of a horrific crime.
Wow, 1938.
Yes. He used the phrase "stay woke" as a literal warning to Black Americans about the very real physical dangers of systemic racism and white violence. Then Erykah Badu brought it into the modern cultural lexicon in 2008 with her song Master Teacher. It meant maintaining an active, critical awareness of structural injustice. And now
Now it's a marketing strategy for multinational conglomerates selling razor blades and light beer.
the transition from a vital protective community awareness to corporate woke washing is basically a masterclass in risk mitigation.
How so?
Following the massive social protests of 2020, corporate boardrooms panicked. To insulate themselves from criticism, avoid boycotts, and capture market share among younger, socially conscious demographics, they issued bold diversity pledges, hired chief diversity officers, and launched high-profile campaigns.
They blacked out their Instagram feeds, they put rainbows on their logos.
Exactly. They utilized low-cost symbols to avoid high-cost structural changes.
That is the crux of it right there.
It is much cheaper from a corporate governance perspective to rename an internal software code branch from master domain or to tweet a supportive hashtag than it is to correct pay equity, expand comprehensive health benefits, or allow your warehouse workers to unionize.
It's the ultimate boardroom bait and switch. Let's look at the boardroom mechanics, because the contrast in how these campaigns actually played out financially is fascinating. Let's start with the one that actually worked for the brand, Nike. How did Nike's data analysts predict a win here?
In 2018, Nike launched their Just Do It anniversary campaign featuring Colin Kaepernick. It heavily emphasized systemic defiance and social justice. Now, Nike's analysts understood their target demographic perfectly.
They knew exactly what they were doing.
They did. They knew the initial outrage from older conservative demographics people literally burning their shoes on Twitter would act as free, massive viral marketing.
And it worked.
The financial outcome was staggering. Online sales spiked 31% over the launch weekend. Their market value grew by $6 billion, and they accumulated over $160 million in earned media.
A massive win for the C-suite, but the hypocrisy was deafening, right?
Yes, it was. Critics aggressively pointed out that Nike was utilizing this progressive messaging to create a moral halo effect, effectively distracting from their ongoing, deeply entrenched reliance on low-wage offshore manufacturing labor in regions with severe human rights concerns.
It was a magic trick.
It was a highly profitable, optics-driven maneuver. They sold the aesthetic of revolution while completely maintaining the economics of exploitation.
Okay, so Nike won the slot machine. But then you have Gillette. Why did Procter & Gamble fail where Nike succeeded?
In 2019, Gillette launched the We Believe campaign, which directly addressed toxic masculinity in response to the Me Too movement.
I remember that commercial.
The reception was disastrous. Their grooming segment revenues declined by 5%, a $350 million loss in that fiscal year alone, followed by another 2% drop the next year.
Wow. Why such a massive failure?
The strategic failure was profound. Nike aligned with an athlete deeply respected by their core urban demographic. Gillette, however, delivered a moralizing lecture directly to its own traditional consumer base.
Oh, that is a huge difference.
Furthermore, critics pointed out that a massive corporation was lecturing everyday men on morality while simultaneously failing to address internal workplace inequities within its own parent company, P&G.
It was condescending. I mean, did any normal citizen actually ask for their razor blade company to lecture them on morality? Like, I just want a close shave. I really don't need my shaving cream to unpack my unconscious bias before I head to work.
It misread the room entirely.
And the corporate miscalculations only got worse. Let's talk about Bud Light in 2023.
The Bud Light partnership with transgender influencer Dylan Mulvaney. They sent a custom promotional can aiming to capture a younger, progressive demographic, as their own executives explicitly stated they needed to move away from their fratty image.
And they lost $1 billion doing it.
The backlash from their traditional consumer base was completely unprecedented. Sales plummeted 24.6% in just 4 weeks. Overall purchase incidents fell 28%. It resulted in an estimated $1.4 billion revenue loss and actually cost them their position as the top-selling beer in the U.S.
Just a catastrophic misstep.
But the structural critique of that campaign, beyond the reactionary outrage, was that it was highly inauthentic pandering. It alienated their core market without establishing any deep structural allyship with the marginalized community they were featuring.
Right, because the second the heat got turned up, they folded.
Exactly. When the conservative backlash hit, the company backpedaled rapidly, which then immediately alienated the progressive consumers they originally tried to court. It was a failure on all fronts.
Because the commitment was purely transactional from day one. And we see this everywhere. Look at Amazon. They pledged to fund travel expenses for employee abortions in 2022, scoring massive PR points on Twitter, while simultaneously operating as an elite power structure, actively fighting warehouse unionization efforts tooth and nail.
Or Target.
Right. Target putting up massive Pride Month displays, taking a huge sales hit from boycotts, and immediately scaling them back the very next year. Or the absolute worst offenders, companies like Walmart, Home Depot, and AT&T, throwing up Pride Month rainbows every June, while simultaneously donating over $400,000 to politicians who actively oppose the Equality Act.
It is the defining feature of performative wokeness, a complete calculated disconnect between public rhetoric and structural behavior. And we are now observing the collapse of this era.
The bubble is bursting.
As the immediate social pressure of 2020 waned, the facade simply dropped. By 2024 and 2025, the S&P 500 had dropped the use of the term DEI in their corporate communications by 68%.
68%.
They quietly dissolved their diversity departments. They laid off the staff they specifically hired for PR. When the public pressure evaporated, the corporate commitment evaporated right along with it.
Because it was never real. It was just C-suite executives smelling their own performative exhaust. But listen, this corporate slacktivism isn't just annoying, it's not just a funny marketing fail for us to laugh at. It has devastating real-world consequences. Because when we replace actual material aid with a like or a hashtag, marginalized people die.
This raises an incredibly important question about the geopolitics of virtual empathy. When our moral attention is dictated by algorithmic visibility and low-cost corporate signaling, massive lethal disparities emerge.
Where do we see this the clearest?
We can see the illusion of action perfectly illustrated by Blackout Tuesday in June 2020.
Oh man, the black squares. I remember logging on that day and just seeing an endless grid of absolutely nothing.
28 million Instagram users posted solid black squares to signal their solidarity with the racial justice protests.
Which felt huge at the time.
But the practical, logistical effect was catastrophic for organizers on the ground. Those 28 million posts flooded the vital hashtags, like Black Lives Matter, which were actively being used by organizers to coordinate physical safety, distribute bail funds, and share tactical information about police movement.
Oh my God.
The performative gesture of the masses actively disrupted and suppressed the vital grassroots logistics of the actual movement.
It was a literal illusion of action. Millions of people clicked a button, felt a rush of moral superiority, thought they solved racism for the day, and went back to watching Netflix, while the actual organizers in the streets lost their communication channels.
Empirical research strictly backs up this slacktivism effect. Studies on e-pledges demonstrate that the ease of a digital signature, the simple act of clicking and forgetting, actively decreases the likelihood of real financial or physical contributions.
Because people feel like they already paid their dues.
Psychologists call it commitment dilution. Individuals feel they have already done their part by signaling online, which drastically lowers their motivation to engage in high-effort, substantive action. UNICEF actually became so frustrated by this phenomenon that they launched a campaign literally titled "Likes Don't Save Lives."
They had to spell it out.
They explicitly emphasized that clicking a button provides zero medical or material relief to a starving child.
And this slacktivism completely dictates which global crises get attention and which ones are left to rot in the dark. How does the global architecture of attention actually work?
It structures empathy along lines of Western geopolitical convenience and algorithmic virality. When we analyze the media data, the disparity is frankly shocking. In an analysis of 5 million online articles concerning global humanitarian emergencies, nearly 50% of all global coverage was directed toward the Gaza and Lebanon crises.
Wait, half of the entire world's humanitarian attention on one specific region?
Yes. Because of that massive strategic media visibility, those regions experience high donor mobilization and rapid public funding. But the remaining 50% of media attention has to be divided among literally every other active crisis on the planet.
Which means someone gets left behind.
Many get left behind. This leads us to the EU framework of a forgotten crisis.
What qualifies as a forgotten crisis?
It is defined as a severe, protracted humanitarian emergency, where affected populations receive insufficient international aid, driven primarily by a complete absence of media interest.
So if it's not trending, it doesn't get funded.
Essentially, these crises occur in regions with low economic integration and minimal cultural familiarity to Western audiences. The algorithm doesn't care about them because they don't generate outrage clicks in New York or London, so the world simply ignores them.
Give us the specific examples because people really need to hear the human cost of this.
Take the Central African Republic. 2.4 million people in need of urgent assistance. 1 in 5 people displaced from their homes, an 80% poverty rate. It receives near zero digital reporting. It is critically underfunded.
And nobody tweets about it.
Or look at the Namibia food crisis. Triggered by the worst drought in a century, 1.3 million people are severely food insecure. Their wheat harvest fell by an astonishing 83.7%. People are literally forced to consume contaminated water. Yet, there is zero mainstream media visibility.
No trending hashtags.
No celebrities posting black squares.
Let me ask you, the listener, a really uncomfortable question right now. When you share that infographic about the trending geopolitical conflict of the week, who are you really doing it for?
It's a vital question.
Are you doing it for the people suffering, or are you doing it for the algorithm? Are you doing it to signal to your peer group that you are on the right side of history? Social media activism has become a digital pacifier. It tricks you into feeling like you are a global humanitarian without ever having to leave your couch, sacrifice a single dollar, or challenge your own comfort.
The structural silencing of these forgotten crises is profound. When people rely on algorithms designed to maximize domestic political outrage and tribal loyalty to tell them what to care about, marginalized populations in non-strategic regions literally starve.
It is bleak. It is deeply, intensely bleak, and people feel it. Everyday citizens feel this exhaustion with fake algorithmic morality. I mean, the hypocrisy of the NPIC, the corporate woke-washing, the empty slacktivism. It has triggered a massive cultural backlash.
A very significant backlash.
But here's where this deep dive gets dangerous. Because we can't just tear down the performative left. We have to look in the mirror at the backlash itself.
The rise of the anti-woke cultural backlash is undoubtedly a defining feature of the current political era. We see it in cultural products, like Tom MacDonald's viral track Fake Woke, which directly lambasted performative postures.
Right.
We see it driven by figures like James Lindsay and Jordan Peterson, who loudly critique wokeness as an ideological framework enforcing strict conformity, and we see it resulting in major tangible policy repercussions.
Like what?
Florida's Stop Woke Act in 2022. SB 266 in 2023, which banned state funding for DEI in higher education, culminating in Donald Trump's January 2025 executive order terminating federal DEI programs entirely.
The backlash is very real, and it is actively reshaping the law. But let's strip the partisan politics out of it for a second and look purely at the behavioral mechanics of the anti-woke movement.
This requires critical, impartial analysis. The anti-woke critiques are often highly valid in their identification of hypocrisy, institutional overreach, and the deeply performative nature of corporate and academic signaling.
They point out real problems.
However, structurally, the anti-woke backlash frequently utilizes the exact same performative, algorithmically optimized tactics that it claims to oppose. Both sides of the political spectrum are currently trapped in what psychologists call the Karpman drama triangle.
The drama triangle. Okay, break this down for us. How does it dictate virality?
In communication theory, viral public stories are structured around 3 essential roles: the hero, the victim, and the villain. Empirical tracking of policy narratives on social media proves that simple narratives featuring human characters in highly distinct villain roles are systematically more contagious and viral than complex systemic explanations of a problem.
We love a bad guy. I mean, it is so much easier to be mad at a specific CEO or a specific purple-haired college student than it is to be mad at tax code 501c3.
Precisely. And this is explained by the behavioral economics of mirrored externalities and loss aversion. Every action or policy has a positive externality, a benefit, and a negative externality, a cost.
Makes sense.
Under rational theory, humans should weigh them equally. But human cognition is distorted by loss aversion. In behavioral economics, this is represented mathematically by the coefficient lambda being greater than 1.
Okay, lambda greater than 1. Explain that in English for me.
It simply means the psychological pain of losing $10 is vastly stronger than the psychological joy of finding $10. Because lambda is greater than 1, negative externality frames narratives that focus on identifying a clear villain who is actively taking something away from you generate massive psychological weight.
So fear motivates more than hope.
They function as highly potent calls to action. Positive frames focusing on systemic, cooperative improvements are undervalued. They are seen as nice, but they absolutely do not mobilize people to click, donate, or vote.
So if you want to go viral, you can't just propose a solution. You literally have to point a finger at someone and scream, they are destroying the world.
Yes. Activists, politicians, and influencers on both the right and the left are structurally incentivized by the algorithm to manufacture simple villain narratives. Complex systemic issues don't go viral. So the anti-woke movement, while critiquing the performative outrage of the left, often generates its own performative outrage, identifying new villains to drive engagement, clicks, and political mobilization.
It's the exact same machine.
It is the exact same algorithmic machinery, just tuned to a different frequency.
But wait, if that's true, doesn't that mean the people screaming about escaping the matrix are just as trapped in it?
Yes, they are.
If you were sitting there, exhausted by the woke washing, tired of the corporate DEI statements, but you are actively cheering for performative, anti-work political theater, aren't you just buying a different flavor of the exact same fake algorithmic morality? Screaming about the elites while spending 4 hours a day participating in their engagement farming ecosystem on Twitter is just another form of slacktivism. You're still pulling the slot machine lever.
It is a closed loop of mirrored externalities. Until we recognize the structure of the triangle, we simply cannot escape the drama.
Okay, we have scorched the earth today. We have torn down the 19th century abolitionists, the corporate boardrooms, the digital tribes, the nonprofits, and the anti-woke crusaders. We have to offer the listener a way out. How do we break the wheel?
The shift must be foundational. We have to move away from the situational ethics of the algorithm, where your moral worth depends solely on your tribal utility or visibility, and return to a robust framework of inherent human dignity, or IHD.
IHD. What are the pillars of that?
True social justice requires completely decoupling moral concern from political alignment or virality. IHD focuses on 4 key dimensions. First, universality. Moral protections apply to everyone, regardless of geographic location or cultural popularity. Second, inalienability. Human status cannot be forfeited, even during intense intergroup conflict. Third, unconditionality. Dignity requires no specific moral performance. You don't have to post the right hashtag to be worthy of protection. And fourth, overridingness. Universal human rights must hold absolute priority, completely overriding the tactical, short-term interests of any digital tribe.
That sounds beautiful. It really does. But how do we actually do that when we are staring at a screen designed by billionaires to make us furious? Give us the tactical toolkit here.
It requires actionable civic media literacy. You must engage in structured cognitive audits of the media you consume. We highly recommend frameworks like the SIFT method. Stop, investigate, find, trace.
Stop is the hardest part.
The most crucial step is the first one. Stop. Pause immediately upon reading a highly moralized headline and document your primary emotional response. Ask yourself, are you feeling smug, outraged, validated?
If my heart rate is spiking, the algorithm is working, I need to close the app.
Exactly. Pausing actively breaks the emotional reinforcement loop. Then you apply the CRA framework. Currency, relevance, authority, and purpose.
Purpose seems like the big one.
Purpose is key. Ask yourself, who created this content? And what is their financial or reputational motive? Are they PR shielding for a corporation? Are they a nonprofit driving donations?
Follow the money, always. And what about when we are reading the actual articles? How do we stop falling for the tribal spin?
Practice lateral reading. Leave the suspect webpage immediately. Don't read their About Us page to figure out if they are biased. Search what independent third parties say about them.
That's smart.
And finally, engage in cross-tribal auditing. When you see an outrage piece about a political opponent, ask yourself, would I judge this action the exact same way if a member of my own in-group did it? It exposes our own tribal double standards and forces us back to universal consistency.
And structurally, how do we bypass the nonprofit industrial complex entirely? If I want to actually help people, where do I put my time and money?
We look outside the hierarchical, professionalized nonprofits. Activists on the ground are experimenting with sociocratic nonprofits, worker self-directed organizations, and swarm organizations.
Define sociocratic for us.
Sociocratic organizations prioritize horizontal, consensus-based decision-making. There is no top-down board of wealthy elite donors dictating policy from a distance. They prioritize collective accountability and remain structurally independent of philanthropic wealth hoarding.
So it's actual grassroots.
True social change requires embracing the unpolished, direct voices of marginalized populations over slick corporate PR branding.
It requires actual unglamorous work, not posting.
Well, my friend, we have absolutely dismantled the machine today. We traced the rot from the underlying code of Facebook all the way down to the psychology of our own fear.
It is essential work. Understanding the architecture of our outrage is the very first step to dismantling it. And to you, the listener, navigating this absolute minefield of a digital public square, remember that you do not need to perform your morality for a screen. You are not a brand. You are a human being. So here is your homework for the week. I want you to go do something unequivocally good, volunteer at a food bank, donate to a forgotten crisis like Namibia, help a stranger carry their groceries, whatever it is. But here's the catch. You are not allowed to post about it. You cannot tweet it. You cannot put it on your Instagram story. You cannot even casually mention it in your group chat. Do it in complete agonizing silence. And if you find yourself feeling like the good deed somehow didn't count because nobody saw it, well, maybe it's time to ask yourself who you're really trying to save. Keep diving deep.